Hello, this is John Epp. Thanks for checking this out. What we're looking at here today is a location or level that I created for Mafia 3, one of the DLC 3 pack called Sign of the Times. The initial idea behind this location was a couple of things. First, we wanted to reuse a lot of stuff that we already had for the main game, incorporating some new features into the game that we originally didn't have. More of a test bed as to how we can do some interesting things maybe for even the next project. So after getting the information on what the whole mission or the whole idea for the DLC was, I spent some time doing some research and coming up with a location. This is one of what we call the locations for places of darkness. These were places in and around New Bordeaux, which is our fictional New Orleans, where bad things had happened in the past. So um, this level was one of those, but it had a couple different functions. Like I said originally, it needs to have, we need to reuse a lot of stuff. We need to put new features and so forth into it. But we also need to make additional
Might be able to
gameplay
get
and
through
as
here.
much as we can do as much as we can really with the space. So what I created here was a warehouse, which was part of a structure of old buildings. And for the first time, we're using the black light as the only means of navigation. The black light was a brand new feature for the DLC pack. So the black light shows you around and where you're going. We also created the blacklight effects, but through this first whole section, you'll basically move your way through the warehouse. Um, Looking at this as a post-mortem, one of the things that stands out is of what's probably not here. Um, because this is going on YouTube, I have disabled the music, which there might be a little bit in here. Um, but there's also missing sound effects, um, which just never made it into the level due to time, um, as well as just gameplay aspects that are not here. Initially, this entire front segment was supposed to have almost a supernatural element to it. You would see things maybe moving um, that aren't really there. Um, the episode or the whole DLC has drugs in it, which basically help you hallucinate. And so you were supposed to be doing some of that. That along the way was removed as it didn't necessarily fit with changed narrative down the road. Um, so we lost those aspects of this, but we did. Um, we were basically left with the black light and the black light effects. All the props and everything else you're seeing in this, though, are things that had already been created for the game and used throughout the game, but hopefully presented in a new and interesting manner that we haven't seen before to make it feel hopefully somewhat fresh. One thing to notice here, which I wasn't terribly happy with, was the fact that you can see a mini map to the right-hand side. So if you're one to navigate with a mini map, there's really no surprise as far as where you might be going or where there might be dead ends. This was basically, you were supposed to maybe have a few jump frights, like the item which fell down initially. We did maintain that, and we're going to be getting something that's sort of interesting coming up here, which is again part of the narrative.
Piece of shit. Hello, nightmare.
It basically was meant to show that Lincoln wasn't necessarily spooked or easily scared by what was happening, but um, it was something that was hopefully would be interesting to the player and might, if the player is already on edge, is going to give them a little quickening of heart rate. In this particular section through here, there is no combat. The only gameplay is the basic move and navigation. So it's completely exploration. We did 3 of these locations. One which was exploration only with hallucinations. This one which was exploration followed by investigation followed by combat, and another one where you sort of had them interspersed. So yeah, we're looking at where we're going to go here. One of the things that you might have noticed is there's stuff on the ground. Those would be bodily fluids, perhaps, which have been left in place. One of the little things to notice right there was the fact that the steps are actually backwards. There's lots of, it seems like it's coming away from there, and you have a lot of blood on the ground or a lot of staining on the ground. So one of the things I like to do, if I can with narrative and visuals, is to create stories visually. So as he turns around in this case, we see a whole lot of highlighted areas which might have been fluids of somebody who was in some sort of situation here, was dragged, and then if you look down at the bottom, dropped. So think of a body having, someone coming up here and then meeting an unfortunate demise. This next section, we actually leave the warehouse. In the investigation of what's going on, we found out that Mardi Gras was really not friendly to African Americans at that time, but this place was connected to 2 others. One was an old slave quarter, and the other was a cotton mill press. The cotton mill press section was cut due to time, so brand new connections had to be created. So we created a collapsible ceiling and a fall down, and we're moving now through what would have been the slave holding quarters or sales place where they held slaves. Again, there was supposed to be some supernatural stuff in here, again, which was cut. So we're left with basically just moving through. What you're hearing is a narrative sequence which is set up inside this room, which is an actual sacrifice scene happening here. So in the storyline, this fits in with what's going on. You can basically now engage in combat.
Cleansed in his eyes. Père Sanglant be blessed.
Père Sanglant be blessed.
He's right fucking there!
It's actually a pretty simple combat scene here. I did a really bad job of actually killing everybody. That was set up as one of the things which is introduced is a slow motion shooting on headshots. So had I gotten that good headshot, that would have gone in slow motion, and it is possible to take out all 4 of the people here with headshots and in slow motion. But I totally blew it there on the combat. What you're looking at here is the actual sacrifice, and this is the investigation mechanics for the 3rd DLC, Sign of the Times. So we've got a few things sprinkled about which fit narrative as well as the main member here.
Shit ton of that drug to get him back here.
Had some input in like how we decided what was going to be on this character and how it worked.
The symbol's like the one at Sammy's.
Here we're seeing the body investigation mechanics. One note here with everything that we're doing, everything is scripted here. So there is no, we have some preset canned animations that were done by the animation department, but looking and engaging this were new systems that were created specifically for this DLC for investigation. And those were scripted as well as the dialogue. The camera and the pieces of the system was created by one of our system designers, or system programmers, I should say. But this was part of the whole experience that was created for Sign of the Times. One other thing with this particular location,
Fuck me.
specifically, we wanted to show in the narrative of what should have happened in the very first mission of the game with Anna, except from the end piece. If you played earlier in the story, you would have actually seen this guy leaving from an earlier mission. So you may have actually recognized, him here. Other items around the area are not necessarily required, but were put in for the investigation mechanic and as part of the narrative. From this is one of the few locations that was
Blood.
heavily modified.
Probably
This
from the
this
victim.
building, which was the slave auction and slave quarters. I worked. All of the art and visuals you see here were done by a couple different environmental artists. I didn't do the actual art, but the layout of the location, the movement through, was all the things I created, as well as doing all of the scripting for this location as well. Whether it's, the 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 wood falling that we saw earlier, that was fully scripted with just systemic um, systems to cut down on the need to use cinematics, which were time consuming, and we didn't have time or resources for those. So we're getting a little bit of narrative here.
Smells like rum. I've seen offerings like this in voodoo ceremonies, meant to appease a deity.
What you see on the ground is some of the drug effects, which is why everything is very hazy and sort of a little wobbly. That effect was put together by our effects department. Again, details, things on the wall, like showing what this is, trying to tell story through some visuals if we can, was important, especially once we got rid of one of the locations and the supernatural sort of aspect of the entire DLC. So it was important that we show that. There we're seeing a investigation which didn't work as well as we wanted to. There's a point on that where you need a highlight, and it can sometimes be quite hard or sort of difficult to actually see. Here we're outside in a small courtyard, and we'll see this again a little bit later, but here we're heading towards our exit. You'll notice there's some lighting up here. Part of that was put there to help guide the player back out again. Again, we're coming to a narrative section real quickly. This was all hand scripted, put in, including the guys
Looks like I'm
arriving and the
getting
cars
company.
ahead and everything there. The animation of him walking was done by our animation department. Now, the whole point of this particular level was to split things up from, like I said, investigation or exploration, investigation, and now combat. So as you're coming back inside, you're not given your tools, your investigation or exploration tools, you have your combat tools. And it's actually pretty hard to see. One of the cool things we wanted to show off here was the dynamic lighting. And so we have all the characters coming in, they're talking, you can all see and hear this, you can see the lights coming through. This is one of the things we didn't really do in the initial game, which was use a lot of our dynamic lighting, and that was something we wanted to do. I've created scripts specifically to turn lights on and have the guys with the flashlights. We'd use them very, very early in the game, but never again. So again, this is sort of creating situations with recycled assets to cut down on using things we just didn't have because of the budget and the time frame.
The blood covers. The blood protects. The blood covers. The blood protects. I see you. I see me. I see everything.
I'm sorry for the darkness here. I don't know. The capture looked fairly dark. It's a little bit brighter, or it should be a little bit brighter in game to be able to see where you're going and what's happening here. But at this point, we've now got to get out of the thing, and we're not exactly sure how many people are in here, and our investigation sense isn't really working very well. It's designed to work best towards the end of the game if you've actually finished the game, as this is the third DLC. In the way I've played this through, though, you can buy the game and all 3 DLCs at the same time, thereby getting to play this before maybe you have some of these extra features like being able to see through walls or having this area already wiretapped. Wiretapping was something which allows you to see AI through pretty much anything as long as it's in the wiretap area. We're going to be engaging here in some combat as we come out. So we have 2 basic areas. We've got this middle area here, which gives you an idea of sort of the sneaky cover-based combat. And then we'll move through more of a linear section as we start to exit, followed by a large confrontation at the end. This section, though, was set up to be dealt with in a lot of different ways. So you can go loud or very, like I tried to stay quiet there and sort of screw it up. You can definitely go through there quietly if you want to. There are people that have come through and gone on towards the sacrifice area. There's an area that opens up, and we'll see that a little bit later. But you're getting to be able to move out through combat here. Other thing we did, which is we added some additional objects that are destructible and have movement, such as the masks. You can knock those over or shoot them down. That's something you can do. One of the things I liked about this, though, is that it doesn't feel like the same place when you're coming out, even though it's very recognizable. But it is set up to have interesting combat.
You can't slip past us. Oh, no.
So here I'm calling in one of the services. That was another thing that was also added to this, was to make sure that all services worked, such as the calling in help, backup help. My backup help came, but I wasn't watching what was going on, and I got shot down. It's actually quite a battle when you see the AI fight the other AI, and they're actually pretty decent. What we're doing here, though, is reloading to the last segment where we appeared on the top of the warehouse before everybody came in. One of the things that we're going to do is go backwards a little bit, and we're going to jump back down to where we came out of the sacrifice room, because if we sit and wait, the door there will open, and we could exit that way if we feel inclined. So there's multiple ways with dealing with this if you want to. If you don't feel that you're comfortable coming that way, you can come back this way, and you could still play through this with a slightly different experience. There is a way, which isn't shown in any of the videos here, where you can actually sneak your way out. It is possible to exit the area stealthily. So in this location, you've got multiple play styles, multiple way through, which is something we wanted to support in all of these. Most of the investigation locations didn't necessarily have a lot of this stuff. This was one of the few that did, because we wanted to create a longer experience. Other investigation locations might only take 5 to 10 minutes. This one should take, we're hoping, about 15-20 minutes.
Ass out of this shit.
We'll be cleansed of your wickedness.
Go at him from the other side.
One thing you might also notice in this was something that the team that worked on this third DLC was sort of adamant about, was that we are equal opportunity when it comes to enemies. We made sure that we tried to represent the cult as sort of realistically as possible, so they're both male and female enemies
Get your ass over there.
throughout this DLC. That's not present in either of the other DLCs. I've got a real good weapon here. This actually is fairly difficult without a nice fully automatic assault rifle. One of the other things in creating these spaces, I always created spaces where you couldn't empty the entire space by having basically fish in a barrel. So this is set up with different battle zones, which allow me to control where the AI is. So in a lot of cases, if you kill 4 or 5 AI, I don't constantly keep funneling them towards you. You will get a few, they'll trickle here or there depending on the different AI types. That was a shotgunner, so his AI type will necessitates close quarters and searching. So they'll do that a lot. But others will actually stay in place and wait for you. That way you just don't, like I said, end up with like a fish in a barrel situation where you completely empty everything out. So now we're getting to the exit. The exit was sort of a big final battle. You'll get other vehicles coming up. This is one of the easiest ways to actually go through this, which is if you have some grenades, you can blow some vehicles up. We'll see how we do here. I am taking some damage, and it's basically a fairly, it should be a fun and engaging firefight, trying to get away. Other little details you might not have noticed, if you look to the card to the right, people that came back were actually part of the narrative. They were supposed to be taking away the dead body, which was the guy you investigated earlier and left. One of the other aspects with this as well that you have to design for is the fact that you do need other weapons in a lot of cases. It's sort of hard, as one of the tenets of the game is weapon churn. So you'll notice I'm pretty light on ammo here, trying to get out, which is about what you want at the end of the day, where the person playing feels like, hey, I just barely survived this. So I hope you enjoyed sort of this overview as I came walking through. I think in hindsight, the things that I might, one of the things I might change a little bit, would have changed if we could have, is maybe add a little more space as far as sort of a change of pace. I was happy though that this was something that we finished fairly, I don't want to say quickly, but took a lot less assets and work for the environmental art team versus some other locations which were much required on much newer sort of props and stuff. So I was happy with that. Here I'm going through showing some of the destructible stuff that we were playing around with, which we didn't really have in the full game. The other part too is that we just didn't have the time at the end of the day for the sound department to put some of the stuff in that was initially designed, and again it was a time thing. So that's just sort of how it goes sometimes, and you take what you've got and you do the best you can with it. So yeah, again, thanks for watching. I hope this gives you a little idea of like one of the locations that I made here, and sort of how it fits in with the game. This location, like I said, though, was, while it reused tons of assets, was, you know, created from scratch. It was not part of the initial game. The location wasn't there. The story wasn't there. None of the narrative was there. This was created just specifically for this. This is just one of several locations I worked on for the DLC, as well as helping design some of the features for the
You gotta
investigation.
check out the Hollis mansion in that school.
So thanks for
I'll
watching
tell
and
'em what
listening.
these sick
I
fucks are
appreciate
doing
your
now.
time.